Hi, I'm Jim Fielding, and welcome to Jim Fielding and Friends, a podcast where we explore what it truly means to live and lead with authenticity, kindness, and impact. Each episode brings together leaders who inspire me, people who lead with heart, break barriers, and redefine success. If you're looking for honest, insightful, and thought-provoking conversations, pull up a chair. Let's talk.
We can choose who we love. Nobody's letting go. Chosen family.
And I went to Michigan State University for law school. I have a degree in international and comparative law. Mm-hmm. And I moved right to Philadelphia after law school, a city I'd not lived in, even though I'd been in the burbs for a while. And my family had since moved away. And I started my career first in disability law and then became the in-house counsel for the Philadelphia Bar Association for a number of years. A job that I left to run for office. Mm-hmm. When I was 31 years old, I met with my incumbent state representative who had been in office since I was 6 years old. And I told her I was going to run against her. She told me to go fuck myself. I didn't. Instead, I ran a very, very solid race with the help of some of the most important people in my life, even to this day, and won my first election by 230-something votes, and then spent the next 10 years in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in a gerrymandered minority, largely as the only openly queer person, openly being the operative word.
Very important.
I like to joke that no place that has as much marble or gilding as our capital hadn't had queer people in it for all time. It
is a pretty fancy capital.
Fancy capital, one of the best.
I've been there. Yeah, it's pretty.
And I spent my time in office focusing on women's and reproductive rights, racial and ethnic justice, and of course, LGBTQ civil rights. I ran for higher office and I lost. I ran for lieutenant governorship in Pennsylvania, but I also retired from my seat at the House at the same time. Around the same time, I fell in love. And that was years ago, and I'm still very much in love. I run an organization now. About a year ago, a little under a year ago, I was hired as the first CEO of a political action committee that uses major breakthroughs in algorithmic data analysis, predictive data analysis, and AI to essentially identify the most beatable bigots in office in any given election cycle. Not who are the worst.
And now they all know why you're here.
And now, right? We hunt down the ones that we can actually do something about, that we can actually beat. And unfortunately, there are, and I have done this in my life. I've put too much focus and too many resources behind battles that cannot be won to the detriment of those that could be.
Yes.
And when I was first approached by this organization and their sort of this new and sort of very exciting way in which they approach changing politics by getting rid of the most beatable bigots in the country, I was a quick yes.
No, and I remember you and I talked when you first took it, and I was like, hallelujah. Because first off, I think, I think that, listen, you are an activist, a representative. You have been in the trenches. I'm an activist. I always say I'm an activist just by living my life, basically, but I'm a donor. But what I love about what you guys are doing is the targeting, right? Because I think many, I'm not an Uber donor, right? I'm not like sitting at the table, but I think one of the things that was hard in the last election cycle is I was struggling on where to give my money, right? Like, was I supposed to be giving it to the central committee? Was I supposed to be giving it to the Governors Association? Like, it was confusing. And what I found is now, especially with like groups like yours, I would rather give it to individual candidates. To your point, it's not like I'm trying to go to Vegas and win the bet, but it's like my whole thing is I want to make impact, right? And I like the tangibility of seeing my donations. And I love the fact that you guys are using algorithms and science, fact-based decision-making to actually help make those decisions. And I mean, you took the job at a hell of a time. And you're doing all levels, right? You're doing
We do. The organization prior to me being there had a really serious focus on school board races.
School board, yes.
They had gone out in 2022, had focused on the Moms for Liberty candidates around the country and beat 14 of the 15 of them. And, anybody that's listening that may not understand why a school board race is so important. First, there are states in which school boards are disproportionately important, have a disproportionate impact.
Yes.
States like Texas, states like Michigan, where a person on a school board can have a really huge impact.
Huge.
They're similarly like in Virginia, there's an out elected board member named Carl Frisch, who is the board, I believe, the school board chair in Fairfax County, an enormous county in Northern Virginia. And I think often about Newt Gingrich, that way back in the day, Newt Gingrich had this sort of contract with America. It was about compassionate conservatism. And they understood that school board candidates become state representatives, become state senators, become members of Congress, become U.S. senators. And that the pipeline for elected officials, that conservatives could take advantage of that pipeline of elected officials in a way that Democrats maybe had not realized that they were doing. It's a good thing to have people in elected office that have experience, and school boards was a way to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I love that we're on this vein because, my dad was a mayor of Port St. Lucie, Florida, and was a fireman and policeman, military. So you and I have that in our background. But when he retired, and it's funny because he was from Florida, and I think people underestimate in Florida the homeowners associations. He grew up as a board member in his homeowner association, then became president of the homeowner association, then became a city council member, then became mayor. And I think people like in Ohio, that wasn't a phenomenon. Like, I don't even know if we had homeowner associations in Ohio, but my dad always used to say, all politics are local. And my dad was a Reagan Republican, a Bush, was involved in those campaigns. But would always teach me and my sister, all politics are local. And he's like, who's on your city council, who's on your school board is actually more important than who the president is, even though we all get wrapped up in the president and the Senate, and we should. I'm not saying any of them are unimportant, and I think now living in Georgia, I really feel that because we have very active local politics, very active local fighting. And school boards is where the book banning stuff is happening in Georgia. That's where you really feel it in Georgia. And
I think most people, if they were to create a sort of grievance list about how they feel impacted day to day by politics, good politics or bad politics,
right.
The vast majority of things on that list, if they're being honest with themselves or being honest about their day, are things that are impacting them because of municipal politics, because of local politics, city councils, town councils, county representatives. As someone who was a state representative, but representing the core of one of the country's largest, major municipalities, I'll tell you more than half of the things that my office received calls about for constituent services were actually municipal things. Now, we knew not to say, hey, call your city council person. They were largely things that we over time developed an expertise in doing. But that's part of the reason that, politics, like a lot of professions, experience matters. Now, good experience begets better experiences, and bad experience isn't useful over time. But I understand why when I'm voting, and especially when I'm voting for somebody in Congress, you better have shown me your service prior to running for a massive federal office. And I see it all the time when people say, hey, I care deeply about these 5 or 6 issues, and so I'm going to primary my congressperson, or I'm going to run for this open seat. And I think all of those issues had some local nonprofit or public interest organization that was working for them. Were they not worthy of your support? All of those issues had local elected officials that were working on them at one point or another. Were you involved in that work? And if you weren't, why weren't you? And if you're frustrated at a level where you see the federal government causing problems, did you not see any of those other problems in a way that you could have intervened before?
Do you think you'll go back and do office again? Will you run again, or are you going to?
I will not.
Tell me why.
No, there's a couple practical reasons, and then there's a couple emotional reasons. The practical reason is that I have since left Pennsylvania. You know, I moved out of Philadelphia when my term ended. I frankly to follow my now husband.
Yeah, right.
You know, following
you follow
love.
Love is nice.
And I'm from a little bit of everywhere, and so I was ready to kind of get back in that adventure mode. And I do believe that people shouldn't move places and simply run for office because they might be good in office. Yeah. Your neighbors deserve to know that their elected officials know who you are, know that what your streets are. Maybe not, you don't have to know your children's name or your local schools, but that matters.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this show, make sure you leave a review, subscribe, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you and look forward to seeing you soon.